and welcome to our SomCon discussion today, featuring icons of California winemaking and production. My name is Michelle Meter, and I am the founder and director of SomCon, and pleased to be joined here today by an exceptional panel, along with our moderator, Lars Lai, and sponsor, Meredith May, publisher of the Som Journal and the Tasting Panel. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome you to join us over the next 2 weeks as we bring some very important conversations to our industry. On June 23rd and on June 30th, we will host a two-part series on managing career uncertainties, moderated by Master of Wine Jeff Lipitska, alongside a panel of sommeliers that represent both supplier side and entrepreneurial discussions. In the wake of COVID-19, this talk will allow you to hear from sommeliers who have made successful career transitions as they address both the obstacles and opportunities that they have faced along the way. And then also on June 26th, we will be joined by Leah Jones of Diversity in Wine and Spirits. And then on July 2nd by Philippe Andre, U.S. Ambassador of Champagne Charles Heidsieck, alongside a panel of Black wine professionals for a two-part series of Unheard Voices in Wine. This session will discuss a range of topics, including hiring companies in our industry who are currently doing diversity work, representations of people of color throughout our industry and leadership positions, and what some educational institutions are doing to address inclusion, to name a few topics. We're happy to be part of today's important dialogue, along with those that will be featured over the course of the next 2 weeks, and ask that you watch your emails for opportunities to join us and register. I also want to add that thanks to recent donations to the Som Relief Fund by Cliff Lead Vineyards, we are issuing another round of grants to our beverage community affected by COVID-19. We're grateful for the support and look forward to helping additional individuals in need over the coming weeks ahead. Before we get started, I also want to mention that there is a chat function in today's webinar. We encourage you to go ahead and ask questions to panelists in this chat sidebar. All of our panelists will be watching and address individual questions. If there's a question that you would like the entire panel to address for you, we encourage you to include that question actually in the Q&A, and we'll address that at the end of today's discussion. With that, I'd like to again thank our wonderful panel and the tasting panel and the Som Journal for being with us today, and we'll turn it over to Lars for introductions. Lars, you're muted.
There we go. Thank you very much, Michelle. It's wonderful to be here. Great to work out the technicalities too. I want to thank everybody for joining us today on behalf of the Som Journal and the Tasting Panel, and Meredith May, our publisher and editor-in-chief. She's gonna weigh in a little bit later as well. And we want to get rolling here because we've got a really fantastic panel. Usually my voice is associated a lot of times with teaching about Italian wines, and I had a dear friend call me up last night and tell me that to hear me speaking about California wines was going to be akin to hearing a New England Yankee speaking Portuguese. It could happen, who knows? If you know me, you know that I am a dedicated terroirist, no matter where that terroir is. And I truly believe that it will only be wines with a sense of place that will be able to compete in the global marketplace that is getting more and more competitive. And I've been thrilled to watch the evolution of California AVAs really honing in on the very unique sites. Terroir is alive and well in California, and we're thrilled to be able to talk about it today. So we're going to address what Soms want. They want us to talk dirt. They want to hear about your altitude and your attitude, and they want to know how you use your wood. So we're going to open it right up with Justin Seidenfeld from Rodney Strong Vineyards in Sonoma. Justin's got a great background working with Sonoma Sparklers, also in Napa with some small lot Cabernets and Pinots. Interestingly, his degree is in viticulture and enology, which enables him very much to fulfill his role at Rodney Strong, which is to oversee the winemaking literally from the vineyard straight through to the glass. So Justin, please tell us about your terroir, how you handle it in the winery, and how that translates in the glass.
Well, thank you for having me, and good morning to everybody all over the country. I'm seeing people from Florida, New York, New Mexico, even some international people. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm from Rodney Strong Vineyards. We are a family-owned winery in Sonoma, California. I believe I'll be representing our terroir today for the panel. I'm going to start sharing my screen right now. So a little bit, as Lars mentioned, my background is I have a degree from UC Davis in viticulture enology, and I get the privilege of overseeing our winery and all of our brands, which include Davis Bynum, Rodney Strong, as well as our new brand, Rowan Wine Company, starting with our vineyards, which we own about 1,400 acres, all the way through to the glass. Our founder, Rodney Strong, who founded the winery in 1959, so we're about 61 years old at this point, so we've been around a while. He was a ballet dancer before he became a winery owner and winemaker, world famous dancer, and loved the passion that wine brought to the table. He was a very instinctual businessman and winemaker. He loved to take risks, and we feel he was quite the innovator, which is one of our ideals that we still try to follow today. He was such a trailblazer that he went bankrupt a couple of times, to the point where our current ownership, the Klein family, purchased us in 1989. So they've owned us for the last 31 years. And Tom Klein and his family are farmers, started about 100 years ago, buying literally 1 acre of a bean farm in the Stockton Delta area that his grandfather and his grandfather's brothers purchased after coming out of the army from World War I, and took it to where we are today. The family believes that farming is the foundation of our success, and so we feel that while our winemaking is important, our farming is that much more important. We believe that without great grapes, you can't make great wine. So what is Sonoma County? Sonoma County is an amazing place with probably one of the most diverse wine growing, a collection of diverse wine growing areas potentially in the world. And I know there's a lot of other awesome places represented on this call. But in Sonoma County, we feel that with our diversity of locations, whether it be cool climate wine growing like the Petaluma Gap, Russian River Valley, and the Sonoma Coast, where we can grow exceptional Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and cool climate Syrah and other cool climate varietals, to the Alexander Valley and Knights Valley, where we have an extraordinary balance of great soils, as well as the right climate and elevations to grow world-class Bordeaux varietals. We can kind of hit the nail on the head depending on where we source our grapes. And so at Rodney Strong, we own 15 vineyard sites that are scattered from the very southern tip of the Petaluma Gap, right near down by the San Pablo Bay, and going all the way to the far north of the county with our Cooley Ranch. And then we also look at elevation. So we have flat ground vineyard for Sauvignon Blanc in the Alexander Valley, which is almost at sea level. And then we go all the way up to over 2,000 feet with our Cooley Ranch, where we grow Malbec and Cabernet. So that terroir is extraordinarily important to who we are, and we always like to say place matters, and our place is Sonoma County. By far and away, the place we work with the most, not meaning the only place, but the place we work with the most is Alexander Valley. We make a series of Alexander Valley Cabernet, single vineyard Cabernets, which a lot of you potentially had, as well as grow Zinfandel, Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, and other varietals in the Alexander Valley. The majority of our vineyard holdings are there. And it's a wonderful place that gives us a kind of a balance between warm climate wine growing, as well as the impact from the coastal influences coming through the Petaluma Gap and cooling down, especially the southern parts of the Alexander Valley. It also has beautiful hillsides that we have planted our vineyards on for the most part, especially when it comes to Bordeaux varietals. And that really allows us to take advantage of the hodgepodge of awesome soils that we get to work with, whether they be alluvials or fluvial soils that were generated through river flows. We have volcanic matter, we have metamorphic matter. And so depending on which site we are choosing to grow in, we're getting a very complex basket of flavors and mouthfeels coming from all of our different vineyard sites, which makes the winemaking side of things a whole lot of fun for me. Our 3 single vineyard sites, you know, the ones that we're most famous for are the Alexander's Crown Cabernet. That's over here. That is the first single vineyard Cabernet ever produced in Sonoma County back in 1974. The vineyard was planted in 71 by Rodney Strong. And at the time, he was sort of, you know, criticized for planting that vineyard because before he chose to go up on top of a hill to plant a vineyard, everybody assumed you really needed to go on the valley floor, kind of bordering the Russian River. That's where the oldest plantings are. They felt that hillside farming was ridiculous, and you know, it was a waste of time. And with that wine and the quality that it showed, he really started the phenomenon of people moving up into the hillsides and then ultimately to the hilltops. And that's where most of the highest elevation vineyards, you know, got their start. And granted, while that was only 350 feet, today, you know, we have ours at 2,000 plus, but I know some other sites that other winemaking friends of mine have that can get up to close to 3,000 feet. And, you know, that was one of those pioneering moments in Sonoma County that Rodney Strong brought to the table, which was the hillside vineyards with the thinner soils that are better drained and more ideal aspects to get the right amount of sunlight and exposure to the right amount of wind can really push that envelope of quality to the heights that we hadn't seen in Sonoma County prior to that. Our next and potentially most famous vineyard, because of the accolades it's received, is our Rockaway site. Rockaway is about mid-Alexander Valley outside the town of Geyserville. This is a little bit higher. This goes up to 750 feet. And the soil and composition is a little bit different than we have anywhere else. And this has it's based in Greywacke with a lot of chert and obsidian, and that really lead to this brambly kind of more earth tone qualities versus some of those pure characteristics we get from the volcanic soils at Crown and the metamorphic soils at the next site that I'll talk about, which is Brothers. So Brothers is last. That's our furthest north vineyard in the Alexander Valley. Not the furthest north we have, but at least in the Alexander Valley it is. And it's also the highest that we have in the Alexander Valley. This tops at just over 1,000 feet, getting pretty close to 1,200 feet. I'm sorry?
You're at 2 minutes. Sorry.
Oh, great. So I better keep going. So this 2 minutes left. I'm sorry. Lars, was it 2 minutes left?
Yep, that's correct. 2 minutes left.
Okay, great. So this is another great site that we have. On the last vineyard that I want to talk about is our Cooley Ranch. This is our newest site. It grows at 2,000 feet, and I'll let you guys read that caption. The last thing I wanted to do is kind of show you a quick video to round out my talk. So here you go.
From the pioneering spirit of our founder Rodney Strong to the vision of proprietor Tom Klein, Rodney Strong Vineyards holds strong to the foundation that built the brand.
Soon the young vines will be pushing up through the earth,
Since 1959,
reaching up to the sun.
the drive to innovate has been inherent in all we do, from that first single vineyard cab in 1974 to the exciting endeavors for the upcoming decades. Place Matters is not just our motto, but it's our commitment to Sonoma County. For 4 generations, Tom Klein and his family have been stewards of the land and champions of sustainable farming techniques. We are mindful of where we came from as we look towards our future. Now we celebrate 60 years as a brand and 30 years of leadership by the Klein family, making us a true family-owned winery. Climate, soil, and sustainability. all add up to unparalleled quality vintage after vintage. Just as Rick Sayre carried out Rod's winemaking legacy, our next generation of winemakers, Justin and Greg, are expanding upon Tom's vision of the future of Rodney Strong through innovation and stewardship. Looking forward to our future and what's to come. We're Rodney Strong Vineyards.
All right, well, thank you very much, and I am done.
Thank you very much, Justin. I appreciate that. So next up, we have Michael Schultz from St. Supri Estate Vineyards and Winery in Napa. Michael hails from the Barossa Valley. He's had some experience in France and South Africa. He's been 10 years with St. Supri, and I'm kind of very interested in hearing a little bit, if you have it in there, about the replanting that you did back in 1996 at St. Supri to match your blocks and your to the different varietals. So rejiggering to address the terroir. So Michael, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Lars. Yes, I did grow up in Australia in the Barossa Valley, so quick little bit of history. I grew up on a big old family farm there. I'm actually sixth generation on a property there that was settled by my great-great-great-grandfather. He was the first settler. It's one of the few properties left in Australia's Barossa Valley that is still holds the original title, which is pretty interesting. So hence, that's where I cut my teeth, was first of all in vineyards before I went to college and studied winemaking. One long story, but I found myself in the Napa Valley. And while I've been with St. Supri for 11 years on this tour, this is my second tour of duty with St. Supri. My first tour started in 1996. So I've spent, I don't know, something like 17 or 18 years with St. Supri, which has been fantastic. We are in the Napa Valley, of course. Napa Valley is a very small valley. It makes up 4% of all the wine production in California, and with about 46,000 acres under cultivation. We at St. Supri are an estate brand, so we have 2 vineyards, and of the more than 500 brands within the Napa Valley, while many have an estate wine, only a dozen or so are 100% estate, and St. Supri is one of those with our 2 properties. We have a property in Rutherford and a property in Dollarhide. So we'll talk about that first, because Lars alluded to the clonal selection that we created with our Sauvignon Blanc initially, and that started way back in 1998. I've been making wine at St. Supri for a few years on the property, and we realised we had a very special block of Sauvignon Blanc within one of the oldest Sauvignon Blanc plantings, a planting that's now about 30 years of age. And so we went in there in 98 and we found some vines that were just spectacular in health, in yield, in flavour, and a sort of exotic profile. And we marked those vines, and we took cuttings from those and established a dozen or so vines. From there, we took those and we established a couple of rows, and from there we established a block. And today, of all the Sauvignon Blanc we grow on this ranch that you see in front of you, more than half of those are from that original selection. And it's a unique selection. It's nothing special about the clone. It's a California Clone 1, although that is special. It's a great clone. And that's the mother parcel right in front of you there. But the selection we found creates a Sauvignon Blanc that has incredible grapefruit, incredible green lime thread and citrus approach. Sauvignon Blanc has those anyway, but the grapefruit particularly is very powerful in this wine. It's really created the identity of what we are. And Lars, you alluded to earlier the fact about terroir and the importance of terroir. That's what life is all about with wine. What places personality in a wine, places what creates your personality of your wine, and what have you. In front of you, you see the Dollarhide Ranch. It's quite a remarkable location. It's actually a 1,537-acre property, of which a little shy of 500 acres is planted vineyard. So with the balance of that, we maintain the property in its natural state. And that's part of our efforts to maintain our Napa Green certification, which is an effort of sustainability. You'll see the peaches on the screen here. One of the things we do today is we try to encourage a diversity in agriculture. So we actually grow stone fruit, and we have something like over 1,000 trees. We even have chickens and all sorts of things going on, all in our ability to enhance sustainability and diversity as an old farm would be. You see the lake there in front of you. This property has 7 lakes, and they have a natural capture of water. And are the source for maintaining our vineyard and our property. The property has an incredible range of soils. I mean, Napa Valley itself has half of the soil orders in the world, and on our property we have about a third of those that are within Napa. We have everything from our hillside vineyards, which is where we grow our red wines, particularly our Cabernets, of course, because this property is strong on Sauvignon Blanc and strong on Cabernet with a small element of Malbec and Petit Verdot. But the Cabernets are grown on the hillsides. It's a mountain site, so it's an elevated location. And those elevations start at about 700 feet and move up to 1,100 feet. At the lower elevations, we have our Sauvignon Blanc, so they're on the sort of the deeper soils. The hillside soils are, of course, shallower soils, quite unique. They're from the Bracer series of soils, which is a silty loam soil that's a very fast draining. A lot of those hillsides have a lot of rock, and they're derived from weathered shale from many years ago. In fact, it's quite interesting when you dig an 8-foot pit on the top of these hills, you can actually find fossilized ocean shells in there, which is pretty kind of unique and cool. But a great site and quite diverse, as you see in the photograph in front of you, the hills you see, the undulation and what have you, and the core of what you see is Cabernet. On the flatlands, we see a slightly heavier loam. Still, on part of those flatlands are still a sandy loam, in being the Tahama series, and another part is a heavier, deeper, darker loam with very rich soil and what have you. So they're the soils we have across the property. Because it's such a significant property and because we have so much diversity through the soils, we have a lot of variability across our Cabernet Sauvignons, for example. So we can have Cabernet Sauvignons that have really deep, dark sort of fruit profiles, and equally we can have other locations that have more bright fruit profiles and what have you. So really kind of a unique site and unique place, and really a fun place to farm. Like I said, the foundation of my career started on the farm before it got into the cellar, but so I love being out there. On the flip side, if you were to visit us, you visit us at the cellar. The cellar is located on our Rutherford estate, and Rutherford is, a magic place to grow Cabernet. And it's a different series of soils. We have 3 soil series on that property, and they're different again, but some gravel in the front of the property, deeper, higher clay content in the back of the property, sandy in the front. So we have Cabernet up the front, Merlot sort of as you head towards the back of the property for those reasons, because they have a higher water holding capacity as you enhance the amount of clay that is within that loam. And so we have a diversity, and of course Rutherford is famous for the Rutherford dust, which is that element of tannin, that fine-grained tannin, that textural feel that is really sort of exciting in the profile of a Cabernet Sauvignon or a red wine generally. And as I mentioned, Merlot, we grow some Merlot in the property. I think it's about as far north as you want to come in Napa to grow Merlot, but it really grows exceptionally well with that. So in the cellar, we're doing a lot of things in regards to production of these wines. So of course every red berry that comes into the cellar is sorted. It's double and sometimes triple sorted. So every berry is inspected, so cluster to berry and sometimes to berry again before it goes to tank. We have a number of vinification directions on what we do. So they can be a huge amount of small lot vinification in open top fermenters with old world approach towards punch downs and so forth. And more recent years, we've started to add some new elements to our red wine program, those being small oak vats for fermentation and also concrete tanks. Each of those are unique to themselves, because if I put the Cabernet from the same block in an open top steel tank, in a concrete or in an oak vat, I get 3 different profiles on my Cabernets, which is really cool, really unique, particularly when you come back to blending. And one of the wines we make is our Dollarhide Cabernet Sauvignon. It's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, of course, from the mountaintops of the ranch and from some of our oldest vines that are 35 years of age. And but I can make even though it's 100% Cabernet, it's still a blend from all of those techniques. And the final technique.
You got a minute and a half left. Sorry.
All right. And the final technique that we have on that is barrel fermentation. So we actually put some of these sorted red grapes into our barrel, and we actually macerate and create that wine by spinning our barrel. Now it's crazy, it's a huge amount of work, but it makes another unique component to those wines when we do the blends. We've got a couple of wines we can talk about. Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc, we'll chat about that. It's a wine that is tank fermented with over 80% to capture fruit, vibrance, and those nuances of that. And then about a little shy of 20% is put in the barrel fermentation in this toasted oak barrel. So it gives this really background seductive toasty approach to that wine. And then we talked about Merlot. We do a Merlot for Rutherford. It's got a little Cabernet threaded in, a little Cabernet Franc, pretty cool wine. And then of course the Dollarhide Cabernet Sauvignon, which is 100% Cabernet off of those old wines of the Dollarhide Ranch. So there you go. That's a little bit of a spin at St. Superi and our estate wine program that we have there. Thank you.
Fantastic, Michael. Thank you very much. You even had 25 seconds to spare. So I'm going to throw two questions to you from the audience. Number one was, on the property, do you have a restaurant?
No, we do not have a restaurant. We do have a food program. So we have a chef that operates on site, but not a restaurant per se.
Okay. And the other question is, what is your total production?
Total production of our red wine program particularly, we probably do about 25 or 30,000 cases. But the core of that is our estate Cabernet Sauvignon. I mean, we make wines everywhere from about 15, 16,000 cases down to 200 cases.
Great. Well done. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
But next up is Russ Weiss, president of Silverado Vineyards in Napa since 2004. Russ grew up in a family farm in Madera, correct? Working the vineyards with your father and grandfather. You kind of left the hive for a little while to teach literature, French and English in both California and Japan. How fascinating. Followed back into the wine through communications, and here you are now in Napa with some very interesting, exciting projects. So tell us about your terroir, how you handle it in the winery, and how it translates in the glass. Please, Russ.
Thanks, Lars. So first of all, thanks for suggesting that my teaching experience was fascinating. I think I put international students to sleep all around the world. That was basically that career. And before I get into Silverado, I just have to say, Michael's a great friend. And not only can I vouch for the fabulous and delicious wines of St. Superi, but the peaches are outstanding. Dollarhide peaches, just ridiculously great. Well, I think most everybody knows that Silverado really got started as the dream of Ron and Diane Miller. They came to the Napa Valley in the mid 70s and started looking at sites, and ended up putting together just an amazing estate of 6 different vineyard sites all around the valley. Diane really started with the idea that the land was absolutely beautiful, and since it was working land, she wanted to preserve it as working land, but also preserve the inherent natural beauty as well. So, we are farming about 370 acres in total in the Napa Valley around the southern part of the valley. But in fact, that acreage represents only just under 60% of the total estate. And you can kind of see that with the shot of our Silverado vineyard, which, includes the Pine Ridge thinks it's their Pine Ridge, but that's in dispute. That's our Pine Ridge on the other side of the trail. So in all, as I said, it's 6 amazing sites. The only one that wasn't originally planted to vinifera back in the 1800s was actually our Weinberg site, which is on the Sonoma side of Carneros, and that, in fact, is an ancient agricultural site. It just happened to be in apples before we got our hands on it. The entire estate is really, as I mentioned, in the southern part of the valley, really all of it just within about 10 miles of the San Francisco Bay. And the red wine sites are really over on the eastern side of the valley, so in those fantastic volcanics. And that's really what I wanted to focus on today was our two largest vineyard sites, our most historic vineyard sites, Silverado Vineyards and Mount George. Just one final thing, like Michael, we are, under the aegis of the California Land Stewards Program, and our wines are in the Land Trust, so everything is certified Napa Green and preserved for generations of Miller family and our customers to come for many, many years. I think Michael mentioned the incredible soil diversity of the Napa Valley. It's 50% of all the soil types found in the world, and over 33 different soil series. So on any given site in the Napa Valley, not only for us, but for our neighbors, you have this amazing ability to dial into, if you're in a state, to dial into kind of the half-acre parcel of differences, even with the same rootstock, the same clone. The morphology of those vines over the season changes fairly dramatically depending on the soils that you're in. So I mentioned our Mount George site. Mount George is the name of the vineyard. It honors the ancient volcano that kind of informs the soils of the whole area. It's our baby appellation in Napa. It was formed in 2012, and very lucky to have been on that panel and been part of the process that submitted to the TTP to achieve that appellation. I was just sitting in the room watching other people do the really heavy lifting, so I don't want to take any credit for it. But it's an amazing site, and our newest little appellation. I think you can see from the rainfall, one of the interesting things about that site is that it gets about 2/3 of the rainfall that you might have normally in the valley, just as a regular rainfall reading, but basically half of the rainfall that you get over on the western side of the valley. So the Bacchus Range, on the east side of the Napa Valley, obviously quite dry. And one of the unique things about Coombsville is Coombsville Gravelly Loam, which is unique, in fact, to this site in the world. It's a sort of a undeveloped tufa because the Mount George didn't really explode like most volcanoes do. It didn't form a caldera. It just sort of erupted in a subterranean way. And some of this tufa then is really rather undeveloped material. And even though it looks like a rock, you can pull it apart like it crumbles apart like chalk. And if you think about it, 20, 30 feet down below the surface, you've got these big chunks of chalk that absorbs that rainfall and allows us to dry farm, even though we're on quite steep slopes with not a whole lot of rainfall. If we get about 15 inches, that's enough to soak up into that tufa and allow the roots to go down and find their bliss in terms of water over the season. It's a beautiful site, and we're protecting, as I said before, wildlife corridors and a number of migratory species, bird species there as well. Then in Stag's Leap, of course, I think one of the interesting things about Stag's Leap, obviously, it's only about 3-4 miles. Our property is only about 3-4 miles north of our Mount George vineyard, but Stag's Leap has that little wind tunnel, which gives us a lot more wind at different spots during the day, and particularly in the afternoon. And that wind starts to shut down photosynthesis as we get later on in the evening, which means that you get late sun that helps you develop phenolics in the skin, but you don't get quite the sugar accumulation that you might had you not had that wind. And it's fairly reliable. You can kind of set your clock to it. And in addition to that, unlike Coombsville, which has that Coombsville gravelly loam, we've got this Terra Rosa soil. Michael mentioned that Bressa dibble soil, which is sort of this high iron content of volcanics, which gives you that classic sort of Stag's Leap, tiny blueberry looking grape, and a lot of fantastic silky tannin in the resulting wines. Again, it's a site where we're protecting a lot of wildlife corridors. This is our very famous otter. Ron Miller who passed away a couple of years ago, lived just on our Miller Ranch, just across the river from the Silverado Vineyard. And he had a koi pond that I think this otter thought was a sushi bar. So he ended up having to abandon his notion of keeping fish in his pond, because this otter could smell him, a mile away. Anyway,
You got 2 minutes left, Russ.
Thanks. It's again a super stunning site. And from that site, obviously, both sites, we do the same sort of traditional élevage, night picking, optosorting in the vineyard, very gentle pump overs, and traditional barreling. And that produces, I think everybody knows, our Solo from Stag's Leap and our Geo from Mount George. Just one note: there's a history of Geo here, and it is the oldest site in Coombsville, first planted in 1868. But both sites have the UC Davis UCD30 clone, which is a clone we developed on the Silverado Vineyard. So it is the Silverado Disney clone. That was a product of 20 years of massal selection, and really, in terms of terroir, we love that because it's really celebrating a clone that really mutated itself on our site. So that's just a little bit about the estate we're privileged to be custodians of here in the Napa Valley.
Fantastic. Thank you, Russ. Appreciate that. So next up is Paul Clifton from Hahn Family Wines in the St. Lucia Islands. He's the winemaker there. Great experience there working with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in a cool growing climate. That AVA, I know that your late proprietor, Nikki Hahn, did a lot of work to establish that AVA, and you guys also have noticed some differences, which I thought was interesting, between even the northern part and the southern part of the AVA, different styles of wine coming out of it. You've transformed a lot of your key vineyards from Cabernet more toward the Burgundian varieties, and you have the Lucien series, which is dedicated to highlighting some of those single vineyards. So please tell us more about that terroir, how you handle it in the winery, and how it translates in the glass. Paul.
Good morning. Yeah, I was going to tell you guys, a little bit about focusing on Santa Lucia Highlands and
Paul, if you're there, we just lost your voice.
Lars, we may have lost Paul. Lars, you're muted.
Thank you, Michelle. Shall we move on and come back to Paul?
Yeah, let's do that. I think.
Or can anybody figure out what's going on for Paul?
Well, it looks like Paul's logged back out now. So let's go ahead and go to the next panelist, and then we'll circle back to Paul.
Great, James. That means you're up. James Ewart of Diora Wines in San Barnabé, also just in the shadow of the St. Lucia mountain range. Another Australian, grew up making wine in the Adelaide Hills with your father as well, specializing in Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And another gentleman who has a degree is doing work in viticulture as well. So again, that grounds up view. So James, please tell us about your terroir and how you.
Am I back on?
Yeah, but I think at this point we're going to let James go, and then we're going to come back to you, Paul, if that's okay. We got it set up, so we'll be right back to you. Go ahead, James.
Thanks very much, Lars. Well, thanks again for having me speak today. I'm going to talk a little bit about San Barnabé AVA, which is, if I can get the screen up here, which is roughly about 60 miles south of the Monterey Bay. And hang on 1 second here, it seems to have frozen on me. Share. So Unfortunately, it's frozen up here. Sorry, guys. San Bernardino is about 60 miles south of the Monterey Bay, and so we're in the Salinas Valley. We have the San Lucia Mountains running to the west of us, and it's about 20 miles to the ocean as the crow flies, but all of the marine influence comes down the Salinas Valley. Thank you, Lars, for doing that. We'll just make that bigger. So if we go to the next slide, that'd be great. I can kind of give you a snapshot. So you can see San Bernardino there in the southern part of the Salinas Valley. We've got the San Lucia Highlands on San Lucia Mountains range on the west side, and that really provides a barrier to the marine effect, and so we get a little bit warmer down there than say Paul is in the San Lucia Highlands, but we get cool every night. We cool down to probably 50-55 degrees, so that really helps us to grow a large range of varieties from Sauvignon Blanc all the way through to Syrah. On the western side of the valley is the Gabilan ranges. It's an older soil type, and we'll talk a bit about why that's important in a little bit. On to the next slide, a little bit about the history of San Bernardino and grape growing. San Bernardino was part of the mission San Antonio de Padua.
Can you guys see my screen? I'm sorry. Are you able to see it? Okay.
We can just see, if you can put it on slide view, that'd be great.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yep, no, that's good. So a little bit of history. San Bernardino was part of the mission, and where some of the first grapes were grown in Monterey County. It was San Bernardino itself was named after Saint Barnabas, who was a leader in the church. And San Bernardino was actually deeded by the mission to Pedro Rios in 1842, where it's believed they had some grapevines and made some secular wine for the church. Wasn't until the early 70s that grape growing got underway in a big way, where Prudential Insurance provided the capital and McCarthy Land Company provided the resource and engineered San Bernardino, and basically joined a number of properties back together to what it once was under the mission. In 1988, the Indelicato family purchased the property. They realized the potential for growing really good Chardonnay initially, but soon found out it grew a lot of different varieties well. In 2004, San Bernardino was awarded its own AVA, which was about 25,000 acres in total. When the Indelicato family purchased the property, they really undertook a pretty major replanting program and really focused on planting the right variety in the right locations. We'll talk a little bit about that, but in 2011 and 16, they sold off about 7,000 acres. The vineyard at one stage was a total of about 12,600 acres. Following on to that, and really kind of focusing on our case good sales, we basically built a small winery within a winery where we have a series of open top tanks, really just dedicated to Pinot Noir. And so in 2014 was the first vintage of Jura Pinot Noir. So let's go on to the next slide. That looks good. Thank you, Lars. So a little bit about the whole AVA itself. So we have about 5,000 acres of the 25,000 acres total AVA. So obviously climate has a big impact on growing grapes and hence winemaking. And as I said earlier, we do get warm. We can get into the mid to high 90s, sometimes 100 degrees, but it's usually only for a couple of hours till around about 2 o'clock. when the wind picks up and not only cools the vines down, but also stops the vines from actually functioning. And so really that window of growth is pretty regulated by not only the temperature, but also the wind. Early on, UC Davis came out and studied Sambanabi extensively and found there was about 22 distinct microclimates throughout the vineyard. You know, with the undulating hills of different soils, you can get some quite dramatic differences. Second major factor is obviously the soil. One of the major determining factor that separates us from vineyards to the north and south of us is the high amount of aeolian soils. Aeolian soils meaning wind-derived. So not like the Lockwood Shale that is north and west and sort of south of us. So it's quite a unique situation. It's believed these soils were derived from the Gavilon Range which is on the east side of the Salinas Valley. These are very poor soils in terms of vigor. And so as a viticulturist, you can really manage those vineyards really well. There's also, like in a lot of places in California, there's a lot of it was shallow sea, and so there's limestone lenses, particularly to the north of the vineyard. So here we've got a map of the Sambanabi, our vineyard, which the Indelicados own. We've kind of all the areas in green are all the different vineyards, but we've kind of highlighted where we source grapes for our Jura Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and also Syrah, which is a small piece, one of my favorite varieties. So you can see it's spread out pretty well. If you kind of look from the southeast to the northwest, it's about roughly 5 miles, kind of, and again, as I said, there's a wide range of topographies. Most of those vineyards are planted between 300 to 600 feet in elevation, but the whole AVA, there's some elevation about 1,400 feet. If we go to the next slide, we can really kind of see that diversity in soils. So you can see, you know, all that diversity, which can be a challenge. And again, as the Indelicados have replanted that vineyard, they've really tried to plant to the various soil types. But you can see, in general, the soils on the eastern side of that map, that kind of browny gray. These are the aeolian sandy type soils. And then if you go to the north and the west, you kind of have in that solid gray, you can see that line there. It's a lot of Lockwood shaly loam, which is a heavier soil. So if we go to the next slide, Lars. So what does that mean in terms of what happens in the glass? You know, I think we're dealing with Pinot Noir. That's always a hard question to answer, because especially with Pinot Noir, there's such a diversity in clones, and those clones interact differently with the soil type. But I'd say in general for Pinot Noir, those wines that we make from those aeolian soils, those sandy soils, they seem to have more of a bright red raspberry, strawberry character, versus the ones on the north and west, on the hillside part of the vineyard, kind of the foothills of the mountain range there. The soil's a little heavier, get a little bit more structure, a little bit more dark fruit. So again, it's the interaction of clones really makes growing Pinot Noir at that site very, very interesting. I think Chardonnay is the other major variety that we have there, and those sandy soils really make wines that have some really nice pineapple and really good viscosity, versus again the northern part of the vineyard, when we have some limestone deposits, which the wines have a little bit more minerality, a little bit more structure, a little bit more flinty citrus. So again, as a winemaker, I love having all of that diversity to play with. And I've been with San Barnaby for 20 years now, coming over from Australia as an intern, and I'm still learning a ton each and every year.
Awesome, James. We've got to wrap it up there, though. I'm sorry for your 10 minutes, but thank you for jumping in there.
Thanks for saving me.
Presentation. Hope it works. Sorry for the technical difficulties on my end as well. Let's bring it back to Paul and let him resume where he left off.
I don't even know where I left off. Sorry, James. Can you guys hear me all right? I'm going to let you drive, Lars, because apparently we're having internet problems here in Monterey County.
You guys haven't learned about my driving yet, huh? Let's see what I can do. I know I've got your presentation here, so there we go. Let's try this again. And where's my share screen? Oh boy. Sure you want me to drive?
I could try it again, but
I'm a second away. I got it. Here we go. Share screen. And there you guys are. Share. And take it up here. All right. How's that looking?
Looks good. There you go. So if you can go to the next one.
With pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Just give you guys a little topographical view of the San Lucia Highlands. Basically, we're looking at, I'm going to talk specifically about Pinot Noir today. And, we've got 4 vineyard sites within the San Lucia Highlands. It's the Highlands itself is spread north to south along the San Lucia mountain range. The mountain range stretches from Monterey down to San Luis Obispo, and it was formed by tectonic shifting of plates. On the eastern side of the San Luis Valley, you have the Gavilan mountain range where Chalone is. And if you go to the next slide, it'll show you, the stretch of the San Lucia Highlands. There's about 50 growers, primarily Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, along with a little bit of Grenache and Syrah and some other varieties spread in there. It's about 18 miles long, about 2 miles wide at the widest, and really has, if you go to the next slide, so you're looking at, it's a bench, basically, we're sitting on. On the western side of the mountain range, you have Big Sur coastline. We're on the eastern side of that mountain range, and it's basically an alluvial fan that has jetted out over millions of years and formed this, basically a terrace over the Salinas Valley. You're looking down at the valley floor there, and that is a lot of row crops. Most of the nation's leafy greens come from Salinas Valley. Very fertile, heavy cloy.
And there he goes again. There's his fertile heavy clay.
There he is. Paul, you're back.
You're back, Paul. Go ahead. Jump in.
Yeah, so it's unstable.
Stick with
So
it.
the soils are really well drained. It helps us to control the vigor of the vines. We have a series of soil sensors going throughout the root zone, which allows us to really control the vigor of the canopy, as well as some control over the size the fruit gets. You go to the next slide. The soil itself is it's made of it's granite based, but it's not, you don't really see granite rock here. You'll see a lot of schist, which is really crumbly to the fingers, and you'll see gneiss, which is metamorphic granite basically formed from granite over metamorphosis of this tectonic shifting of plates that form this mountain range. So really well drained soils. We have to irrigate. We could not dry irrigate. It could rain a couple inches here and I can get out in my truck in the same day and not get stuck. Versus going down the valley floor, I'm going to sink up to my door. We'll go to the next slide. So the other heavily impact, one of the main climatic influences we have here is fog. We get advection fog every day coming in from the Monterey Bay. It moves in through the Salinas Valley all the way kind of near where James is in San Bernardino, King City area, and it'll burn off from south to north. So you'll see sun hitting the vines earlier in the morning. The further south you go in the AVA. And so photosynthesis is starting up sooner than the northern part of the AVA in the San Lucia Highlands. So we go to the next slide. And as the day moves on, we have about maybe a 3-hour period from when the fog burns off here, where you have some nice photosynthesis happening till about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. And then you've got the hot air rising off the southern Salinas Valley down near Paso Robles. It's rising up and it needs to be replaced by something. It's being replaced by the cool ocean air from the Monterey Bay. And actually, as it moves through the Salinas Valley, it's gaining speed.
So close.
It'll shut down photosynthesis like James was talking about, and there will be no sugar being pumped into the grapes. What's happening is no sugar being pumped in. The grapes are gathering anthocyanins to protect itself from the sun, also allowing the seed to develop from green to brown, which is very important for Pinot Noir. So, the further south, it's delayed ripening due to wind. Further north in the AVA, more delayed ripening due to fog. So if you go to the next slide. So we've got, we started making wines for the Lucien program from each of our 4 vineyards in 2005. And so I wanted, it's more of as much of an experience or an educational experience for me and my team, as well as for the consumer, to make all these wines exactly the same across each of the vineyard properties. Otherwise, I wouldn't know if the winemaking was affecting the change or if it was the vineyard side. So we continue to do that today. And Lone Oak, the furthest to the north, you're going to get more silky tannins, more elegant structure, lighter in color. Move into Doctor's Vineyard, the most wind exposed of all our blocks, or all our vineyards. It's going to have more structure, more tannin. And then you move into Smith, our highest up. It's more exposed to the sun, a little less wind. It's going to have more black fruit, more viscosity. And then you move into Hook, our most exposed to wind and sun. It's going to be very voluptuous and structured. And then finally, we do a blend of the 4 vineyards with the Han San Lucia Highlands Pinot Noir, which is a really good representation of the AVA in itself, just because we have all these different clones and blocks spread among the 650 acres that we farm up here. So that's just a little overview of San Lucia Highlands, and thank you, and sorry for the internet delays.
That's all right. Thanks for working through it, Paul. Appreciate that. All right, so next up is Daniel Dow from Dow Family Estates. He's the co-owner and associate winemaker. Daniel his degree is actually as a trained engineer. He graduated in computer engineering from University of California in San Diego. But what explains everything is that he grew up in France, and that's where he learned his passion and love for wine. And he's very much translated that into Paso Robles, where he's a huge proponent for luxury Cabernet and founded the Paso Cab Collective. So Daniel, please tell us about your terroir, how you handle it, and how it translates in the glass. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you all for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here, and Meredith as well. So I'm going to put up a presentation here so we can start. Let me see, share screen. Should be able to handle that.
I'm ready to go if you can't.
Why don't you go? It's good.
Okay.
Okay. So my brother and I founded the winery in 2007. It was driven by simply love for wine. Becoming a winemaker, my degree, as Lars said, was in computer engineering. And we'll go to the first slide if that's possible, Lars. And we acquired a mountain in the west side of Paso Robles. And it was actually the original site for Hoffman Mountain Ranch, which was founded in 1965. Dr. Hoffman founded the winery in 1965 with the help of Andrei Chalichev. And today we have actually 3 operating wineries on the estate. We actually renovated the entire winery that Dr. Hoffman built. So it is fully operational today. It's a very, very unique site because it is actually at 2,200 feet elevation, which is the highest elevation vineyard in Paso, and only 14 miles from the Pacific Ocean. And it faces the Templeton Gap. That's a very rare combination in California. I'm not aware of any other vineyard that is actually that close to the ocean and only at 2,200 feet elevation. Overall, we focus very much on the Adelaida district of Paso Robles. We have about 700 acres there with about 230 acres planted or under development. If you've been to the site, you'll know how steep it is, very steep slopes ranging from 28 to 56%, and very high density planting. The lowest density is 2,234 vines per acre, but many of the new blocks are all planted at 3,630 vines per acre, so extremely high dense vineyard that is reminiscent of a first growth in France, which is averages between 9,000 and 10,000 vines per hectare. We are a Bordeaux estate. We have a lot of qualitative clones that were planted on our mountain. As a matter of fact, we were the first to import many of these clones to Paso when we first came there, because before that, Paso, for the most part, was regarded as a productive Cabernet region. And we really, as Lars said, we've really worked hard on elevating the bar to try to really showcase the potential of what the region has to offer. So overall, we're planted to 98% Bordeaux varieties and 2% Chardonnay on the lower slopes on our mountain. We actually have some Chardonnay planted, which does extremely well. We're family owned and operated. I manage the vineyard, I make the wines, and my brother handled the sales and the marketing, and together we run the company, the winery. And we're multi-generational. So, my family actually has a lot of background in olive farming, but I was the first one to jump in and become a winemaker. And now my children have followed suit. I have 5 children, and I have 2 winemakers, 1 vineyard manager, and 1 who handles all the social media and PR. And they're about as passionate as I am about the whole venture. The next slide gives you an idea on Down Mountain. So this is kind of what we have planted. The biggest majority of what we have planted is Cabernet Sauvignon. Lots of Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc excels quite a bit on our mountain and has the ability to ripen extremely well. I don't know if you're following, Lars. I don't see the slides turning, but we should go toward the picture of the vineyard a little bit before that. Possible?
How's that?
Before that too.
Before that?
Yeah, before that too. Oh, okay, there's one missing. That's okay. We'll go to the next slide then. So this is a map that shows you kind of what's so unique about the Paso Robles AVA. If you look at the Adelaida district, it is a mountainous range, and it faces the Templeton Gap, which receives the cold weather from the Pacific Ocean. The thing that's very unique about the Adelaida district, why it excels in Bordeaux varieties, is because there was tectonic movements millions of years ago, and a lot of the dirt got pushed up to the higher elevation. So while you see a lot of limestone-rich soils at the bottom in other appellations, the Adelaida district tends to have soils that have a layer of clay and underneath a limestone subsoil. We can go to the next slide if possible, Lars. So that's not the slide, Lars. The one that says the terroir of Down Mountain. There you go. So what's so unique about the terroir of Down Mountain? We like to refer to it as a rare phenomenon. And let me explain to you why. It's a rare place that incorporates the mineral soils of Bordeaux. Most vineyards in France, be it Burgundy, Bordeaux, the Rhone Valley, even in the south of France, you will find soils that we call argilo-calcaire or calcareous clay. If you look at these soils, they have a layer of clay. So if you're standing on top of these soils, all you see is clay and you think it is only clay. But underneath, there's this porous limestone, which allows to give some earthiness and minerality to the wines. And also gives us the ability to dry farm. But as a winemaker, what I really love about these soils is in climates like California, where you reach physiological ripeness at higher sugars. We never have to add acid. The wines that come out of our estates are natural wines. They're all dry, under 1 gram of sugar, and there's nothing used to make these wines besides our native yeast and some nutrition for the yeast. And these soils really allow us to do that. We have 14 actually Cabernet clones planted on steep slopes. We talked about that. We can go to the next slide, Lars. It'll be great. This is a close-up of the soil. Again, notice the first 18 inches is clay, and underneath there's a limestone that is 40 to 50% calcium carbonate. Next slide. The next slide, actually, okay, great. So that's the picture that we were looking for before, but we can go to the next slide. That's great, Lars. Yeah, keep going. I don't know what happened to the presentation, but yeah. We're looking for the terroir of Dow Mountain. Sorry, we're looking at understanding Paso climate. Can you see that slide?
I do not. No, that's all I've got.
Okay. Okay, I'll just talk about it. So there's a big misconception about climate in Paso, and I would love, if anything I want you to remember today is I'd like you to remember when I'm going to talk about climate. The comment I hear all the time is Paso's too hot. Commenting on Paso being hot or cold would be like commenting on Sonoma and Napa together being hot or cold. It is 614,000 acres. It is larger than Napa and Sonoma put together. So let me give you some quick statistics to kind of, give you an idea on that. You could be 6 miles from the Pacific Ocean, and it is too cold to even grow Pinot. You'll have so much shatter that nothing will really grow. You could be 35 miles inland, and it is so hot that you don't want to be there simply. So let me give you some statistics. 2019 vintage last year, I monitored the number of days at 100 degrees or more, because at 100 degrees, the quality gets affected, especially for Bordeaux varieties. The airport, which is on the east side of Paso, saw 27 days at 100 degrees or more. Napa St. Helena saw 11 days. Calistoga saw probably closer to 20, and Bordeaux saw 4. On our mountain, we saw 0 days at 100 degrees. So we tend to always average temperature between 82 to 85 degrees, which in effect matches St. Helena. So one of the reasons we call our terroir a rare phenomenon is because it is one of the only places we could find that incorporates the soils of Bordeaux and the climate, the beautiful climate of St. Helena and Napa, all in one location. So let's keep going to the next slide, if we can, to the estate wines, because we only have a slide or two left for 2 minutes. Yeah, so our flagship wine is our Soul of a Lion. This is a wine that has really changed the course of Paso 10 years ago. The first vintage was about 10 years ago. This wine is super, super high phenolics. I cannot emphasize enough how high the phenolics are on this mountain. If you're a winemaker, you'll relate to what I'm about to say. Most winemakers end up going dry on skin and doing warm maceration. We actually often, after cold soaking, spend 2 to 3 days only on skin and have to drain. After measuring 600 wines all over the world, Cabernet Sauvignons, we have yet to see phenolics that match what we see on this mountain. It is unreal. That is due to the fact that we dry farm, we're high elevation, we don't cook the grapes with too much temperature, and overall, this combination really leads us to having incredible phenolics. So we've done a lot to make this wine. It uses 15 different cooperages, 3 of which are custom, 1 of which I've created out of Bois Rosé in France. We use our native yeast, which now is sold over the world. Many actually wineries use it in 35 countries, called D20. So it is really a unique wine. And more importantly, it's really helped usher Paso to a whole new era where today Paso is regarded as an area, as a region that is rivaling some of the best regions in the world in producing Cabernet Sauvignon. We'll go to the next slide. I'll be quick through it, Lars. I know I've got a minute left or less. And I hesitated sharing these accolades because I don't want to sound like I'm showing off here. But the main point about this is if you look at the last 5 years, every major critic has basically agreed that our wines are rivaling the best Cabernets in the world. And while I'm very happy for us, I'm more happy for our region. I think today, again, we're in 35 countries with our wines. And today, Paso Robles, especially the Adelaide district of Paso, is regarded as the new frontier for ultra premium Cabernet Sauvignon. Thank you. I think I did just in 10 minutes, right, Lars?
We're right on time. Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. That was great. All right. And so next up is fellow Fernet lover Wes Hagen of J. Wilkes Winery. I would say that if one would consider an AVA to be a Declaration of Independence, then Wes is the Thomas Jefferson of AVA writing. He's single-handedly defined and written a lot of AVAs. Probably the only winemaker alive. How many is it, Wes? 4?
I've got 3 that are on the books and 1 that's been perfected and will probably be approved within the next few months.
There you go. So here to talk to us about AVAs and the great believer in showing place but not sight. Big believer in Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills. Proud of his Chardonnay. You're growing a Lagrein. Talk to us about all of that, please, Wes.
Sure. Because we are limited in time and we do represent an AVA brand, so we make wines from the Santa Maria Valley, where we own Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills Vineyard, Paso Robles Highlands District, where we own French Camp, as well as some wines that we get out of the Santa Rita Hills. I want to focus on Santa Maria Valley today, and also the Miller family that I work for, a different Miller family, and talk a little bit about really how Santa Maria impacts quality vis-a-vis the sort of geologic history of this region. And I want to kind of back end this. The wines produced from the Santa Maria Valley are based on marine soils, sand, and a little bit of calcareous shale and diatomaceous earth. The wines have long hang time. They're full of verve. They're full of acidity. They're full of liveliness. They're elegant. They're restrained. These are true cool climate Winkler Zone 1A wines, and I want to show you why. So I'm going to do my best to see if my presentation will start. Can you guys all see that? All right, lo and behold, here we go. So we're going to talk about wines of character and wines of place and Jay Wilkes. So the Miller family has been growing fruit in the Santa Maria Valley or in Central Coast of California since 1871. We are a 6th generation farming company. This is basically the west coast of the United States. You can see the Juan de Fuca plate, the Pacific plate, and the North American plate. Upper right-hand corner, how many years ago? Watch this. This is a miracle. 20 million years ago, 16 million years ago, 12 million years ago, 8 million years ago, 4 million years ago, and basically the drainage and what we're looking at today. What we're seeing basically here is if we were made out of rock, I would have to give this an NC-17 rating just watching it, because this is probably one of the most violent tectonic shifts on any coastline anywhere in the world that you'll ever see. You'll actually notice that Santa Barbara starts all the way down by San Diego, that Santa Barbara's soil, part of it was actually part of San Diego's terroir for a while and got pushed up. What does this mean to the wines? Well, what it means to the wines is these violent tectonic shifts have left us with these vast swaths of basically sandy soil and hillsides. So we're on an average of maybe 600 to maybe 600 feet of elevation. Bien Nacido is probably between 200 and 800 feet. Sandy soils, sandy loam, small vines. How this really translates is small vines, small clusters, small berries with thick skins. Thick skins by virtue of the high amount of exchangeable calcium in the soil from the calcareous shale and the diatomaceous earth. So a vine determines the thickness of its skins by virtue of how much exchangeable calcium is at root level. In the Santa Maria Valley, we have amazing, maybe 4,000 to 7,000 parts per million of exchangeable calcium in our soil. So thick skins reduce the amount of juice in the berry exponentially. So even a tiny little expansion of the thickness of the skin is going to change the wine. That means Chardonnay with incredible minerality, with great salinity and verve. The acidity stays really, really high and the pH stays low as a result of basically the wind, the fog, the cool temperatures. We have the purest east-west transverse maritime throats of any valleys along the Pacific Ocean from Alaska to Chile. So that's channeling cool marine air basically through. I will go, and the ocean temperatures are obviously very cold. So on this map, you can sort of see on the left-hand side, you can see the Santa Maria Valley basically extending all the way out to Guadalupe and north of the Casmalia Hills, an open area that channels cool wind and fog. Bill Wathen from Foxen always likes to say that we have the laziest vines in the world. You know, they basically wake up in the morning, see fog, go back to sleep, and maybe, you know, come wake up at 11 when the fog burns off, and then the winds really start howling at maybe 2 in the afternoon, and by virtue of stomatal closure via high wind velocity, the vines go back to sleep. So really our photosynthesis window is really sort of 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. So that gives us a longer hang time, basically a reduction in the respiration of acids. So we have wines with a lot of verve, a lot of cut, a lot of liveliness, delicious fruit, and a long hang time. The last 2 vintages in the Santa Maria Valley, 18 and 19, which were back to a semblance of our regular cool temperatures. We did not go over 80 degrees at Bien Nacido Vineyard in the Santa Maria Valley. We didn't go over 80 degrees the entire growing season. And our average high temperature in August is 74 degrees, which I found out is actually lower than the average low temperature in Austin, Texas in the same period. That's just a little thing about me. I've been making wine for about 25 years. I was a vineyard manager and winemaker at Clopepi Estate and Clopepi Vineyards, where I wrote the Santa Rita Hills American Viticultural Area petition. A guy, Michael Servin, called me one of the 100 most influential winemakers in the United States. Probably didn't hurt that I went to high school with him. It's a true story. And I wrote and researched the approval for 3 AVAs in Santa Barbara County: Santa Rita Hills, Happy Canyon of Santa Barbara, Ballard Canyon, and a pending application for my 4th, which would be Alisos Canyon. And I teach food and wine pairing at Allen Hancock, and I write for a bunch of magazines, including once in a while adding some words to the ones listed. We are famous for our Pinot Blanc. Pinot Blanc is sort of the soul of what we do at J. Wilkes. The vines are 47 years old on their own roots with a little bit of interplanted Melon de Bourgogne. That was a mistake. Our Chardonnay, again, predominantly Bien Nacido, a little bit of Solomon Hills. And the greatest thing about these wines, they're AVA designated, and not a single wine on this list is over $30. Our Pinot Blanc is usually on the shelves for under 20, Chardonnay around 20. Pinot Noir about 30, as well as the Cab. These are, $10 to $15 glass pours, and a really good value, and obviously very well received in accolades. Huge moment for us. We hit Wine Business Monthly Hot 10 Brands last year, which was published just this year in February for our Viognier. It's not Santa Maria Valley, but we're doing some good work in the Paso Robles Highlands District. If you love Viognier, this one, stainless steel, zero mallow, absolutely delicious. And there's just some ongoing stuff. We've been producing these wines since 2012. They've been served everywhere from the White House to the State Department. Lots of good accolades, and I look forward to continuing working with these wines. It gives you an idea of what our suggested retail is, although I don't even know what suggested retail means anymore. I do know the word of the year is going to be pivot, though. And that's about it. I do an Instagram and a Facebook live show on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays called Day Drinking with Wes Hagen. So thank you all for listening, and I will give my time back to Chairman Lars.
Thank you very much, Wes. If you could take your screen sharing off.
Sure.
We will get on, and we're going to finish this with a post-prandial. Eric Entrican, Master Sommelier, is here to talk to us about Germain Robin, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about and can't wait to taste again. It's a brandy made with California wine grapes. So in a sense, we're not so much talking about terroir, but we're talking in a general sense, and we're really talking about grape flavors that talk about California terroir. So Eric, please take it away.
Thanks, Lars. I probably should have told you when we started this that I don't want to follow Wes. I just don't want to follow Wes. But great presentation, Wes. Yeah, mine is a little different. I mean, all these great things about terroir is fascinating. I mean, I'm learning stuff too, because every place that, you find out how different everybody's sites really are and how unique. How many unique places there are in California. When I started in the wine industry back in the 80s, I mean, you would just think about generalities, and now we've gotten so much more specific. It's really fantastic to see. Germain Robin is a brandy from California, if you're not familiar with it. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating about it itself, and I'm going to start with an accolade, and I know everybody else finished with accolades. I'm going to start with an accolade. I think it's a very unique brandy in so many ways. And part of it really goes to the founders. So this is the origin story for Germain Robin is kind of interesting. Ansley Cole, gentleman there on your left, and Hubert Germain Robin met when Hubert was hitchhiking across Sonoma. And they started discussing about what Hubert kind of had in his mind from decades of institutional knowledge. He came from a very old Cognac family that basically started the Jules Robin house in Cognac back in the mid-1700s. And so for this reason, he really kind of saw what was happening in Cognac over the 60s and 70s when he was growing up. And there was a lot of industrial production. There was a lot of things that he saw missing from like the artisanal methods that had been used in the past with his family. And so he really wanted to try and find a place where he could be creative, he could be inventive, and where else to come but California, right? That's one of the best places in the world actually for grapes, as well as you'll find out shortly as brandy. One of the things that they really started to do was they started initially looking for grapes that Hubert was familiar with working with. So they started looking for Uni Blanc and other things that were kind of innocuous grapes that really weren't designed to be made into wine. But what they found is they found that it was a lot easier for them and closer to where they were located to purchase Mendocino grapes to make brandy. So the process with brandy is very similar to sparkling wine in the sense of harvesting the grapes. You're looking for potential alcohol levels in the grape, sugar of around maybe 10%. That's kind of what you're kind of looking for distillation purposes. And they started looking and contracting mini wineries, grape growers up in Mendocino and northern Sonoma, asking about the possibility of purchasing grapes with those sort of specific sugar levels. And it's a completely different time for harvest. It's a little bit, before the actual harvest goes on for wine. So they were able to find a lot of people that were willing to jump on that train. One of the things that's really fascinating is they started one of their first grapes they distilled was Old Vine Simeon, 70-year-old Vine Simeon. And back in the 80s, you couldn't give that grape away, but now, you probably have to wait in line for, half a block to get an audience with a grower. But the thing that really kind of turned them, though, was when they started developing Pinot Noir as a distillate. And so when you think about cognac in general and a lot of brandy produced around the world, it's often an afterthought to the wine production from the area. And Hubert wanted to do something completely different. He wanted the brandy to shine, and he wanted the brandy to be the main thing that was really that was highlighting the fruit sources in the grapes. And it's often said you really can't taste, brandy's all about wood, or or any sort of distilled spirit that goes into wood is all about that flavor you get from wood. In California brandy, particularly Germain Robin, you're really tasting things like fruit. You're tasting other things, and the wood is just kind of a buffer to manage that. And so when Hubert got to the point where he started producing Pinot Noir grapes, he was like, "Wow, this is the best grape distillate I'd ever seen." And he was taking samples back to Cognac to visit his family and finding out that he really had something special here. Everything with all these different grapes that Hubert was using, he really had to work with the still in a different way. And if you're familiar with much about distilling, it's basically about a 12-hour cycle on distilling. So you have about 12 hours where you're basically in the secondary distillation. So this is a pot still product. Basically, you do your brûlée distillation, where you're turning the wine into a base that you can then redistill into brandy or an eau de vie, essentially at that point, because it's still clear. What happens then is there's this window that really is about 90 seconds in the distillation process that allows you to avoid a bitter quality that will develop in your distillate. And so of those 12 hours, you have to hit that 90-second window kind of on the head. And I've talked to many distillers, and they're saying, like, they'll taste a product and they'll go, "Yeah, you missed that window by a minute," or "You missed that window by 30 seconds. So it's something that really has to be you have to have your hands on it at all times to really make the best quality distillate you can. This is you saw that in the background. That wasn't just a picture of me on my background of a Doctor Who still video of something out of the TARDIS, but this is actually our distillery, McCall Distillery, which is in Sanger. And what's fascinating about this is Beam Suntory back in the 80s thought California brandy was going to be the next big thing. And so they basically hired Robert Prulot, who was like kind of the gold standard for still producers in cognac, to come over and set up 20 of his Prulot pot stills in this distillery. So this is probably the largest collection of pot stills outside of cognac or some other major distilleries around the world, definitely in California. So we have the McCall Distillery here, and we've just started producing, but everything we have in bottle right now actually was still produced by Hubert, because when we took over Germain Robin, we really had all the products back to the very first distilled one in 1983. And what's fascinating, this is Hubert here. He's come back to consult with us. Hubert actually left the distillery in 2008 to pursue some other education venues and things of that, some consulting. And when we picked up the Germain Robin, we asked him what he wanted, if he was willing to come back and work with us again to kind of create, the Germain Robin he really felt he wanted to make. And when he asked us, he said, "What's your goal?" And David Wartner, our master distiller, said, "I thought Germain Robin was always about making the best brandy in the world." And so Hubert said, "That's your goal. I'm going to stick with you." So I've been distilling with him. It's just an honor to watch him work. And that 90-second window is real. And once the product comes out of the still, it has to go into barrel. Barrel is, if you're familiar with Rio Hagron Reserva production, where they're putting it in new barrel for a very short period of time, little bit older barrel for a shorter, like a longer period of time, but not quite that long. And then much older barrels for an extended period of time. That's kind of how Germain Robin and brandy is typically produced in many places around the world. And what it does is it allows this very gentle integration of the oak flavor over time. And some of our barrels in our share are over 100 years old. And you think that, a barrel after wine production, by the third vintage, you're really not getting a lot of flavor out of it. Brandy has a more impactful kind of pull on the barrel and can actually start pulling flavors from the barrel over extended periods of time into decades. And we feel sometimes with these really old barrels that are kind of 100 years old, it really rounds the wine and gives us this really unique flavor. So our two expressions are our flagship Germain Robin. This is based around Colombard, but there are many other types of grapes in it. It is a minimum age, the minimum age of brandy in this is going to be 7 years old. So we started distilling for Germain Robin in 2018. So we don't really have anything in barrel that we've actually produced. We're looking at all those old stocks that Hubert actually produced. You got
a minute left, Eric. Sorry.
Thanks. All those years ago. And our XO is based around Pinot Noir, and the minimum age in here is basically 12, but in the current bottling, we're closer to 18 years. And this was the brandy that Hubert really wanted to see as the pinnacle of brandy, not only in California, but anywhere in the world. Little sneak preview, we're going to be opening up a brandy house in California. We'll be dedicated as a tasting room, direct to consumer, and that will be something that is coming soon, and we'll have a press release on that shortly. So I want to thank you, and Germain Robin. If you haven't had it, please go out and try it.
I certainly will. Thank you, Eric, and thank you to all our presenters today. I have these mixed emotions because I feel like I'm the luckiest man in the world to be able to guide this sort of panel, these amazing terroirs, these wonderful wine legends, icons of California. And yet at the same time, I've got to crack the whip on time because there's so much great information out there. So with that, I'm going to crack the whip on myself and not speak anymore, but turn it back to Michelle for any of the great Q&As that have come in. Please, Michelle. Oh, yeah, wait, hold on, back up. Meredith. I promised you would say something toward the end.
I'm so proud of everybody today, and everybody here was chosen for a reason, to represent their specific AVA, and the recap of this article is not only going to be recorded that people can watch again, but we're going to have an article with maps, with photos in the September issue of the Tasting Panel magazine. So hopefully everybody will be able to relive today's moments. Thank you, everybody, for your support.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks, Meredith.
Lars, actually, if you pull up the Q&A dialog box, I want you to have it in front of you so that way you can help maybe prompt some of the questions. Some are specific to individual panelists. Do you have it up in front of you?
I do. And we're
okay.
going.
So let's go ahead and start. There have been some questions regarding sustainability and how important that is in wine production going forward. And Lars, if we could maybe start with that question, and then I'll let you take it from there to ask some of the brand-specific questions that have come up.
Great. So you're talking about the question regarding the sustainability, which I think everybody touched on to a certain extent. And if we go around the horn and just give a little sort of fast recap of what everybody's doing with great respect to the environment that is so important to all of us these days. So I'm going to go right back in the same order. So Justin.
Yeah, so for us, sustainability is just really about trying to be balanced on how we approach everything, not just growing grapes, but through our whole business model. We are not organic or biodynamic, but we are a certified level 2 sustainable winery, meaning we've gone through a very rigorous set of protocols to make sure that we're doing as little impact to our environment as possible, utilizing integrated pest management, and we utilize as little water use as possible, incorporating technology into that with continuous soil moisture and automatic irrigation, so we can only water what's needed. That's one example of that has reduced our water consumption from about 40 gallons of water per vine per year to less than 12 gallons of water per vine per year by being able to be more precise about how we use water. And then that goes all the way through our community, where we want to make sure we're supporting our local charities, feeding food banks, paying living wages. So our version of sustainability is a more encompassing concept that incorporates community, environment, as well as making sure that we can make world-class wines for the next 60 years as the family continues their stewardship.
Well said. Excellent. Michael, St. Supering?
Yeah, listen, you'll see that on the back of all of our labels, we have an Upper Green certification for both land and for winery. And that's because we take sustainability very seriously. I talked a little earlier about the diversity of farming that we're trying to encourage now in some of those, in that sort of old-fashioned approach and what have you. However, if you look at our property, for example, the Dollarhide Ranch, I mean, we've got a 1,500 acre ranch that has 500 acres planted. So there's 1,000 acres in its natural state. We maintain wildlife corridors. We maintain bird life corridors. And the goal is, and in the winery, we're doing things similar to what Justin said. We're reducing water usage. We're generating our own power and trying to do those types of things. And the goal at the end of the day is to maintain our lands for generations to come, maintain the situation of our countryside the way it is, and make sure we enhance it, not the opposite. And that's what we're about.
Fantastic. Paul, at Hahn?
I was born and raised here. I'm raising children here, as well as all the people I work with. We are SIP certified, which is Central Coast Vineyard team formed this program years ago, and we were part of that pilot project. But we're going above beyond that now. We're looking, starting to dip our toes into organic farming. I doubt we'll ever be certified in it, but I think for us and my team and the people that work here, it's the wave of the future. So that's our path on it.
Great. And James at Diora in San Bernarbe, not Bernabe. That was the Portuguese pronunciation before. But James.
Yeah, San Bernarbe, as Paul said, we were one of the founding members of that team that a group of vineyards got together to talk about how they could be more sustainable. I think working for a third generation, nearly fourth generation family company, the Indelicados, that they really want to pass on their land in the same, if not better state to their children. So I think that goes right through the company. We do a lot of the similar things from a farming perspective. Falcons at harvest times. We have probably over 100 different owl boxes. But I think it's also important looking at our community too, and our people that make it possible, all of these wines. And as we look to the future and mechanize and bring more skilled jobs to our property, that helps our community in turn. So that's what I'll add.
Awesome. And Russ, we have another question for you, but I'm just going to ask you to talk about the sustainability for now at Silverado.
Yeah, I wake up every morning and think to myself, what would Michael do? I just got to echo, James and Justin and everybody else, Paul's comments. We are, here we work for a generational family. The family lives on 3 of the vineyard sites, so it's personal to us. It's not, it's not theoretical. And beyond that, of course, we also are really involved with the Napa Land Trust, which goes a little bit beyond our vineyard techniques and into the idea of permanent usage easements, which protect the land for open space and agriculture only in perpetuity. So that's maybe another level of airlock that I know, my good friend Emma Swain, who's the president of Saint Sick Brewery, has been tremendously involved with as well. So the whole idea is that, we have a first obligation to do no harm. And we don't, if you take the very conservative approach that you don't know what harm might be, then your default is not to do something, which I think is the smart way to interact with Mother Nature and let this incredible diversity that we have around us, by leaving open spaces, as Michael suggested, do the work for us. And that's been tremendously helpful. We're along 2 miles of waterfront here in the Napa River, which has a tremendous amount of host vegetation for the blue-green sharpshooter, but we got a ton of bluebirds that just eat them. So, if you let Mother Nature do her thing, it works tremendously well.
Fantastic. And Daniel, at Dow Family Estates, obviously you're very committed to the terroir there.
Very much so. We try to foster an environment that's going to be ecologically sound for not only us, but for future generations. We are a SIP certified, sustainable certified vineyard, but we go beyond that. I would say 90 to 95% of all the products that we use are organic. On top of that, we obviously dry farm and deficit irrigate only a small percentage of the blocks. Most of them don't see any water at all year. We have bug hotels that are all over the vineyard to actually encourage the proliferation of good bugs to help the flora. We actually have beehives throughout the entire vineyard to help pollination. And we've actually seen a much better take on fruit set and a much better crop since we actually started deploying the beehives in the vineyard, strangely enough, but that was nice to see. We do take all the steps possible. And again, we have owl boxes, to help a natural way and a sustainable way of controlling rodents and pests and everything else throughout the entire vineyard. So, we always keep in mind that I know that our wines are going to be sold on the market, but first and foremost, I know I'm going to be drinking them every day in my family. So we need to make sure that they're extremely healthy for us and for everybody else too.
Amen. And Wes, I'm gonna ask you to take this at a little different angle as the Thomas Jefferson of the AVAs. Talk to us about, when you're approaching AVAs, writing AVAs, and the overarching importance of AVAs. We're all seeing more movement toward sustainability and concern for the environment. How does that impact the development of AVAs in general?
Absolutely none at all. Actually, the AVA process is uninterested in wine quality or terroir. It's only interested in distinctiveness of soil, wind patterns, precipitation, and everything else. But from the Miller Family Wine Company, the Millers have been farming the Central Coast since 1871, and we're 6 generations in. So obviously sustainability is in our DNA. And to be honest, sorry, that's my blood glucose monitor going off telling me I've eaten too much peanut butter this morning. The most important thing to understand for me is that terroir does not exist in dirt. Terroir must be reflected in organisms and live organisms, and not just the grapevines. It's a dynamic system. So, as vineyard manager for 20 years at Clos Pepe Vineyards in the Santa Rita Hills, and now as a winemaker and spending a lot of time in the vineyards here in the Santa Maria Valley, the key is, yes, we're SIP certified, we're COG certified, we do CCOF organics, we do Demeter biodynamics. So we farm in all different styles. And the most important thing to me about these systems is engagement. Do you have to be biodynamic to grow great wine? No. Organic? No. You have to engage in your own property. And the organic farmer and the biodynamic farmer, maybe they spend a little more time observing and being proactive. So that's what I wanted to add to that conversation.
Awesome. And not to leave you out of this, Eric, is there a correlation there with spirits?
I think you know, anything you're doing in the vineyard to move towards that respect for, you know, the land and the site you have works for every type of thing. I mean, we have a, you know, Germain Robin is part of a much larger wine and spirits portfolio, and you know, with the winery and the spirits making that we do, we have an entire division that's devoted to sustainability at the company, and so, you know, we're really passionate about trying to push that envelope as much as we can. We have, you know, like I said, complete people that's their only job. They're completely dedicated to the sustainable practices we use throughout all of our wine operations and all of our spirits production.
Well, that's great. To Daniel's point, not only do we want to sell it, but we want to drink it. So that's encouraging. All right, we have a couple of producer-related questions. The first one I'm going to throw to Russ Weiss. This is about the tufa soils. You've seen the question, Rice. Do the wines made from tufa soils exhibit higher acidity than those made from clay soils?
So, you know, I wish I could draw a straight line between, you know, what we've got on the Earth's crust and below it, and you know, some of the analysis we do in the wine. I will say that Mount George has a tendency to produce fruit that has a higher sort of ripeness morphology in the skins at lower pHs. So we do think there is some sort of relationship, and you know, it's only in relationship to you know, what we do in Stag's Leap. So that, you know, we have two sites, and so we know they're different. I can't say that the Bressa Dibble, you know, in Stag's Leap is 100% responsible for, you know, a slightly higher pH than the Coombsville Gravelly, you know, loam down at Mount George, but we do see those tendencies in between the two vineyards.
All right, thank you. And that was pretty much it for the questions.
Yeah, with respect to everyone's time, we want to just, again, thank you all for being here with us today and giving us a couple of hours of your morning or afternoon, wherever you may be. Lars, I think that one was mostly directed at you at this point. Although I think, Daniel, you might be joining us from other beautiful parts unknown. But thank you again for a lovely 2 hours and wonderful insights. And to Meredith and Lars, we just want to say thank you again for bringing us all together to share in the discussion and learning. As a reminder, this is being recorded, and again, as Meredith said, will continue to be featured and profiled in the Somm Journal in a future issue.
Actually, the tasting panel, September.
Tasting panel. Sorry, thank you, Meredith, for the clarification. Also, just be watching out for your emails. We will send an announcement when the recording is available and live, and several of our panelists will also be sending us a lot of the maps and illustrations and presentations that were provided here today for your continued education and learning and sharing with your peers. So again, thank you on behalf of SommCon. We appreciate you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully next week with a new series of educational topics that we'll be bringing to you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, y'all.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.